So thank you very much, Travis, for joining us here in the Montreal Esports facilities. So how Montreal has been treating you so far, and did you have a poutine yet?
I have not had poutine yet here. I've had it elsewhere. I know the crowd is kind of cheering or booing. Maybe I will have it tonight before I leave. Montreal's been good. I think it is very, very strange to be in North America and not have everyone just speaking English around me. It's the first time I've ever experienced that. And my French is very poor, so I've been forbidden by my friend to use it here. But it's been really good. I just wish it's maybe a little too cold for me to venture out and see a lot of the city. But the food here has been fantastic, by the way. That is the big thing for me. So I will walk away from this trip very, very happy, if just from all the different restaurants and food that I've had. Yeah.
So let's get back to your roots. How did you get into gaming first, and then into esports journalism?
Yeah, sure. So got into gaming very young. Played Super Mario on the Super Nintendo. Played Lemmings off of MS-DOS from my grandfather's computer, and then just always played PC games ever since. Really, StarCraft Brood War, I think, was the first time that I got into like competitive multiplayer games, and unfortunately I have sucked forever. And when I was in college, I played World of Warcraft and Dota and a bunch of these competitive games with my friends, and I was always the worst one out of all of them at playing these games. And so I think it is very ironic for my friends now to see me being the guy that is in esports and competitive gaming. But yeah, and then I think the esports journalist stuff, I barely even describe myself as a journalist because it almost more of an interviewer, content creator guy, and I kind of just fell into all that stuff by creating a podcast at the sort of start of League of Legends Esports, and then just going and working for a gaming website and all that kind of stuff. Just randomly ended up becoming this person.
So to stick around the esports journalism topic, so obviously there's the Yahoo case, which pretty abruptly shut down a couple of months ago.
Sure.
And pretty surprisingly, there's also the Slingshot case you might have heard of, which was a very good vertical, which couldn't find any viable business plan. So what's your opinion about esports media coverage? And do you think it has some really specific case, like huge personalities like Thorin, like Richard Lewis, like yourself? And do you think it will go on, or it might stabilize into some big medias like ESPN?
Well, speaking of Thorn, if anybody wants like a way too long analysis of this topic, Thorn and I did, along with the former owner of Slingshot and another guy who runs Esports, we did like this 2-hour long YouTube video. It's way too long, just talking about esports media and the challenges there. But like the short end of it is, I think very few people in esports are making money right now. The industry is still new, and people are trying to figure out how to make money. Media is all over the world, not just esports media, is struggling to adapt. You see all these different things closing down and consolidating and trying different models and revenue models. And so I think when you have sort of the new instability of esports, as well as like the instability of media, and you bring those together into esports media, obviously it's going to be very difficult for it to succeed. And I mean, in esports in particular, it's hard because the ad block rate is about 80%. So, if I run a website that has a chance at making $5,000 under normal circumstances and could only make $1,000, one of those is a $60,000 a year situation for somebody. The other one is a $12,000 a year situation. That is not a good living situation. So I think that esports media is just it's a challenge on that front. For me, there's a chance that I go back to do a big media thing, like one of the big names that you mentioned, or the ones that I've worked at before. But I think for the short term, at least, unless I have a really good conversation with somebody, I think for the short term, at least, I'm going to try and figure out how to do it on my own, because I almost wonder if there's an easier path to success as an individual, similar to what Thorn has been able to do, though he does casting and other things. But the question is, can I do this on my own? And we'll see.
Okay, so talking about stability, let's talk obviously about the NALCS franchising.
Yeah.
And we know that Riot has been trying to move a lot around their tournament formats, almost changing every year. So do you think with the franchising, it might stabilize as well the tournament format?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it'll have an effect on their format system because I think that they are still optimizing to figure out what's the best there. That's why you saw them move to best of 3, back to best of 1, etc. But I do think, and if anything, I almost wonder if the new franchise system isn't an opportunity for them to mix it up and try even more things and really just try to lock stuff down. I mean, LCS has only existed for several years now in comparison to traditional sports that have been around for decades and decades. So I think we can probably expect to see more changes in the future. But I do think that hopefully franchising will lend some stability to the system. I think it's really bad when you saw, basically TSM, CLG, Cloud9, and kind of Team Liquid always just sitting at the top, and then other teams entering and exiting the LCS all the time. So now that we should have these teams for the next several years, it'll give them a chance to build a brand and figure out stuff, and it should be really interesting. So yeah, I'm excited about what the franchise system does for NALCS.
Still on the franchising, aren't you afraid that we're gonna lose the chance to have some Cinderella Stories like Misfits this year?
I don't think we will. I think the Cinderella Stories will continue. For instance, Team Liquid, who has looked terrible for years, if they suddenly win this year, that could be great. Conversely, we don't know what the rosters look like, right? You could have, for instance, 100 Thieves, or I'm just going to call them Thieves because I think 100 Thieves is terrible. But Thieves or Clutch Gaming, if these guys build a roster full of people that no one's really ever heard of before, because by the way, NALCS player salaries are going to go through the roof this year. So if somebody's like, you know what, I don't feel like spending $5 million on NALCS salaries, and then they decide to build the rookie team, that can very easily be a Cinderella story and be super exciting if you see, one of these teams with players people don't know, like Dethrone, TSM, or Cloud9, or one of the existing teams.
So talking about terrible names, let's talk about the Overwatch Leagues and their new franchise.
Yeah.
So you've been to BlizzCon?
Yes, I did.
What's your general thought about the way Blizzard is doing it with Overwatch?
Yeah, I've been, I would say, hopeful but critical of Overwatch League. I don't think that, so it's interesting because at BlizzCon, Overwatch League had really good numbers, Overwatch World Cup had really good numbers. And there were more than one person that came up to me and they're like, oh, so it's not going to work, right? Overwatch League isn't going to work. And I think that reveals to me that there's a false assumption that people want Overwatch League to fail. And I don't want Overwatch League to fail. I want it to succeed. My concern has been that the esports industry is not in a sustainable place right now. A lot of people are losing money, and we have to figure out a way to make this thing work. And what we don't want is a bubble where everybody spends a bunch of money in the space and then realizes that their money isn't going to get them anything, and then that goes away. And that investment goes away, and we kind of go back to 2013 esports. I live much more comfortably than I did in 2013, and I think a lot of my friends do as well. LCS production's gotten better. Everything's better now. I don't want to go back to 2013. It was a tough year for me. I went through a breakup. Just anything not to go to 2013. And so I worry that Overwatch League is too much too fast. Now, a lot of people said this about LCS before LCS hit, so happy to be proven wrong there. But I think in a lot of cases, what Blizzard has been selling is not what I think everybody thinks it is going to be. So we'll see. And I from talking to people, it does seem like a lot of people in Overwatch League are committed to a multi-year thing, which should be good because if the first year doesn't work out as well as everyone hoped, we'll see a much better second year. But I don't know. We'll see. I think just to kind of round this out for context, based on my understanding of the numbers and what Overwatch League costs and what everyone's been selling, Overwatch League next year and the year after needs to be bigger than the LCS. That's very hard for me to believe, given that Overwatch League is just starting, and LCS has been around for a while and has like built up and up. So I think that's the disparity, right? Is I see what they're pitching as being not what a league can deliver in the first year in esports right now.
So one of the reasons for these huge developments has been the investments from the traditional sports.
Sure.
So we can see it here because Montreal Sports has been built on Georges St-Pierre investments. Yeah. So what do you think those investors can bring new to esports? How, if they could change some face of esports? Yeah.
I mean, okay, I don't know how many people in the audience know of Marn, the fighting game pro. Some of you guys probably do. He's a friend of mine, but also just a sketchball. And what people might not remember is that he was an owner in the first split of LCS, and I think it was Cloud9 that dethroned him and entered. Cloud9 wasn't even in the first split of the LCS. And so now, you know, the traditional sports owners are people like Golden State Warriors. So, you know, if I compare Marn to the Golden State Warriors, there's a lot of things Golden State Warriors has that Marn doesn't. Now, that's not to say that all traditional sports owners and companies understand esports yet. And I think you are going to see a lot, like anybody that saw the ad that the Philadelphia, I guess they're not maybe traditional sports, but like there are non-endemic companies and when I say non-endemic, it's like anything that's not native to esports, any company or owner that's not native to esports. They have to work really hard and hire the right people to make sure that they create stuff that makes sense for esports. But in terms of funding and knowledge of branding and support, like I am much more happy to talk to, like esports teams right now don't really have PR people for the most part. As somebody who tries to interview these people and work with the teams and they don't really understand how media works and the relationship between the stuff, I'm very much looking forward to a world where these teams start to level up and they have PR people. It's going to make my life easier. There's a million other examples of that, you know. So we'll see some bad logos and some shitty videos, but I think eventually we'll get to a really good point where the non-endemic sports guys figure out the esports stuff, and then we're in a pretty good place.
So the other hot topic has been the Olympics, getting interested into esports. So it's a very large topic. There are a lot of stuff going on. I would just ask you, which point do you think is going to be the hardest to get through if it ever gets real?
Well, first off, I don't really care about esports in the Olympics. I think a lot of people are excited about this, but I don't know. I casually watch the Olympics. Like if there's a video or like USA is doing really well, then I care. But like I couldn't tell you who won the last Olympics, probably because USA didn't win. But I think, you know, like I much more care about the League of Legends World Championships and going to BlizzCon and watching a CSGO major. So I don't see any need for like the Olympics to enter the game. Now, if the Olympics want to enter, that could be very exciting and interesting. And I don't really care if they get in, but if they get in, I could see that being really cool. I think there's going to be, I mean, the Olympics are just, it's like this giant bureaucratic juggernaut. You know, it's just like a mess of all the committee and all this kind of crazy stuff that happens there. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how they enter esports, and if, you know, esports is like fast and nimble and games are changing and publishers own, like nobody owns hockey, nobody owns badminton or whatever else they play in the Olympics, long distance running. And so like, you know, how's the Olympics going to work with like publishers and all this stuff? It's a giant mess. I think it'll be interesting, but I think that the Olympics themselves will be the biggest hurdle. Like the committee and all the bureaucracy there will be the biggest hurdle for esports entering that space, and it'll be interesting to see how it develops. I'm watching to see how it develops, but I'm not like, boy golly gee, we got to get esports in the Olympics, you know. Yeah.
So in a recent interview with the Score Esports, one of the faces of Dota 2, Sir Action Slacks, you might have heard of him, had a very interesting take on esports and how an esports can be successful or not. He was saying that a good esports need to be absolutely miserable to play. Yeah. And that's why Overwatch won't succeed, because it's too fun to play.
I mean, this is the exact thing that I would expect to hear from a Dota 2 person. because Dota 2 is definitely miserable to play. I mean, I love Slacks. He and I have talked a lot before whenever I was at Yahoo, but I disagree with that assessment. I think, first off, there's this obsession with defining what is an esport, what isn't, what is a successful esport, what is not. I think Blizzard is pretty happy with the area StarCraft 2 is at right now. I'm sure they'd love for it to be bigger, but they're continuing to support it. And I definitely think Overwatch can do better than StarCraft. I think we would still say StarCraft is a successful esport. So I think, Overwatch can be a successful esport. I don't know if Overwatch League can be a successful business. That's a separate conversation. But I think, the thing that you need to have a successful esport, in order for something to be a successful esport, you have to have a successful game. And, Dota 2, setting that aside, it is very hard to have a miserable game be a successful game. So, I think it's more about the approachability of a game, and you want it to be very approachable so you can get a ton of people in there, so that suddenly you've got 100 million people playing this game, and 20 million of those people deeply invested in the esport on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So to finish up, I'm gonna go with some very simple binary questions and funny questions. For instance, you would ask me League of Legends or Dota 2. I would say Dota 2, and I would make a lot of new friends here.
Sure.
So first, Brood War or StarCraft 2?
Brood War or StarCraft 2? StarCraft 2. Loved Brood War, but StarCraft 2 is just more modern and more fun.
Faker or Crown?
Faker. I think it's really cool that Crown was able to do well this year, but Faker is. It's actually really hard in other esports even to find like the undisputed best person out of all of the time. So Faker for sure.
Franchise or relegation system?
Franchise, I think. Right now, I mean, it depends. I would not want 2013 LCS to be a franchise system. But I think now we're in a point where we can have that.
Peanut butter or jam?
Peanut butter, I guess.
CSGO or PUBG?
PUBG. I play PUBG. I don't really play CSGO.
TSM or CLG?
See, I can't answer these questions. I think it's been interesting to see sort of the strength of these two companies over the course of the time, and I think both of them are going to experience really big changes. I think TSM is going to accept an investment, and they'll probably change their business a little bit because of that. CLG just got acquired by Madison Square Garden. My good buddy Nick Allen now runs CLG, so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves too.
An easy one, NA or EU?
NA. Easy.
And last one, mid or feed?
Mid or feed? Mid, I think. Feeding is not going to do well for you, I think, in the long term.
Thank you very much for the interview, and have fun.